Hello, welcome to News Central's The Conversations show, where we bring you the latest updates and breaking political stories and analysis of the stories around the continent. I'm Gbenga, Aborowa.
And I am Rita, Omodia. Today we move away from the eras of coup and we're looking at the actions of political parties in Malawi. We'll bring you more of this on The Conversation after this short break. You're still on to The Conversation on News Central TV. And now we're looking at political parties. We're looking at by-elections going on in the country. Now, today we'll be taking our focus to Malawi and Zimbabwe. First, in Malawi, the president, Lazarus Chakwera, dissolved his entire cabinet late on Monday due to allegations of graft. In other words, corruption, which has been biting African countries and the economies hard. The move comes after 3 of his ministers faced charges. The former Minister of Lands, Kezim Sukwa, was arrested in a bribery case. The Labour Minister, Ken Kandodo, had been accused of diverting COVID funds, and the Energy Minister of meddling with fuel deals. All have denied the allegations.
President Chakwera announced all the functions of the cabinet reverted to him until a new one is appointed. As he sacked his government, the president vowed to confront all forms of lawless conduct by public officials. And just before midnight on Wednesday, a list of 12 ministerial appointments was released by the president's office, and it includes only 2 new faces and updates that he's appointed 6 new faces. Well-known businessman and politician Mark Katsonga Fury becomes trade minister, while ruling party loyalist Sam Kawale takes over as lands minister. Kawale replaces Kezi Osukwa, who was arrested last month for bribery. Key portfolios such as finance, defense and foreign affairs are to be announced.
Now, this is a drastic move made by Lazarus Chakwera, and it's quite surprising, Gbenga. I mean, a lot of people will see this as a strong move from the presidency, fighting hard against corruption. Because if we remember, in 2020, Lazarus Chakwera came on the mandate of fighting corruption in the country. So exactly. I think it's a bit of a plus for him.
But I wouldn't really call it a cabinet reshuffle if you bring in just 6 new faces. The last cabinet was 33, and a lot of people accused him of nepotism, and I was expecting to see a lot of changes, which hasn't happened. If you recall, in November last year, there were demonstrations on the streets of Blantyre and the capital, Lilongwe. People were saying, look, we're fed up of empty promises, you're not delivering on the economy, and sometimes I kind of feel sorry for him because he became president in the middle of the COVID year.
You know, and a lot of people were also saying that probably he was forced to reshuffle this cabinet. You raised a lot of questions on this reshuffling of cabinet by Lazarus Chakwera. And some of the questions also are, after reshuffling the cabinet, what remains of the accused ministers? Is it going to be total prosecution, or is just a way to divert attention? Because we remember the video from the Anti-Corruption Bureau in Malawi, who was accusing the administration of not supporting her in the fight against corruption. So it puts a bit of question on the anti-corruption fight of Lazarus Chakwera.
I mean, but for you to say 3 of your ministers will face prosecution, that's a big move, especially in Africa, that, look, you take responsibility for what is going on. And if you look at human development indices, Malawi actually ranks really low. So they need every dollar they can get. And we know the effect of the pandemic on the economy. So corruption is the list. And people have adjusted. I think ordinary Malawians have adjusted to the present day reality that things might not be as rosy as first. But then to hear stories of corruption and mismanagement of the little funds you have will definitely people.
Especially in the midst of a serious tropical storm going on in Malawi. I mean, a state of emergency has been called in the state. But I think at this point in time, a lot of people will rather place more trust on Chakwera's government, despite all the questions that are being on whether he's actually fighting corruption in the country. Okay, so it's a lot of people will put more confidence in Chakwera's government, because if you compare it with other African countries, I wouldn't want to put Nigeria in the question, but if you look at the case of Nigeria, there's been a serious question mark on if presidents are actually fighting against corruption, which is a major bone of contention in every administration.
Yes, indeed. And we'll definitely see how the situation pans out there. We have our guest joining us from the capital of Malawi, Lilongwe, Yvonnie Akonda Sundu. She's a fellow of the Chevening Africa Media Forum and a journalist. Hi, Yvonnie. Thanks for joining us on the conversation.
Hi, Gbenga. Thank you for having me.
It's so good to have you join us.
Thank you. Thank you.
Now, Yvonnie, June 2022 this year will make it 2 years since President Chakwera was sworn in as president of Malawi. He ran for office under the mantra of change. He promised 1 million jobs and a turnaround of the economy. How much positive change has Malawi witnessed so far, and how would you rate this administration?
Well, a difficult question to start an interview with. Well, I would say that for most Malawians, they are complaining because the majority of the promises that the president had made during the campaign in 2020 have not fulfilled. Key among them, the issue of creating 1 million jobs. So not so many jobs have been created. Things are not working in the right direction. He made a promise to fight corruption, but as I'm talking right now, his government is mired in a corruption scandal that is involving a UK-based Malawi, and there's just so much that is going on. One of the issues that I can highlight that has worked, probably 80% has worked, is the issue of the targeted input program, where farmers in Malawi, because Malawi's economy is agro-based, and there is so much population of people that are relying on agriculture for survival. So there is quite a substantial number of farmers in Malawi that have benefited from this program, where they are getting fertilizer and seeds at a low cost. But then still, that is just much of a drop in an ocean, because there's just so much that needs to be done, and then so little has been done on the ground. If I were to give my honest opinion, the Malawians honestly are let down by what President Chakwera has done so far. In June, he's going to be clocking 2 years, but there isn't much to talk about because not much has been done. So it's a tough task. It's a huge task for him. And then it's like most Malawians have lost hope. There are some people that would be saying, if we were to vote today, I wouldn't go vote. If we were to vote today, I don't even know which candidate I would vote for, because there were just so many people that had so much high hopes in the president, but things are not working.
But Yvonnie, don't you think the people are being a bit too hard on the presidency, knowing that he came in the middle of the pandemic? Because we saw a protest in Malawi last November, and it brought Chakwera's honeymoon to an abrupt end. So don't you think it's been too hard on him, being in a position that he came in the middle of the pandemic?
I wouldn't say so, because for most Malawians, what it means is when the president was making those promises, he knew how he's going to deliver. He knew which buttons to press in order for these promises to come to reality. So the question is, how then do you make a promise and then you don't deliver? And I remember there was a time at the peak of COVID-19 last year, the president told Malawians not to get obsessed with the promises that were made during the campaign period, because that was just, a campaign period, which in essence means that the president was saying, well, there's just so much that I know that I said, but don't have high hopes, because what I said is not going to be, it's not going to be delivered. So it's a difficult situation, to be honest. Much as I know there might be some scenarios where Malawians are just being hasty, but for most Malawians, the fact is the president made so many promises and he hasn't delivered much of those promises. That's where the issue is. So I wouldn't say that they're rushing in passing out judgments in terms of how the president is faring or how the president is delivering. No, they are justified, because there's so much that was promised, yet so little that has been done.
Now, Yvonnie, President Lazarus Chakwera, before he became president, he was a pastor and then turned politician. And, pastors and men of God are held to a higher level of scrutiny. One of his pillars of campaigning was the fight against corruption. And how has he performed so far in the war against corruption in Malawi?
Like I said earlier on, we are having this interview when there's a corruption scandal going on in Malawi, where a Malawian of Asian origin who is based in the UK was arrested by the National Crime Agency in the UK and then handed over to Malawi Anti-Corruption Bureau because there are cases, he needs to answer cases to do with what would be termed as state capture, like state capture that happened in South Africa, because he was, using corrupt ways in order to get government deals. And so many top government officials are connected or are linked to this corruption issue. We have a minister, a former minister that was arrested by the Anti-Corruption Bureau in relation to this issue. And it took the president 3 weeks to have this minister fired. He has only been fired a few days ago when the president announced the dissolving of his entire cabinet. And he specifically mentioned that the new cabinet that he was going to reconstitute is not going to have Kezim Sokwa in it. And yes, we have a new cabinet with him not part of it. But the truth is, it took the president 3 weeks. So how would you take 3 weeks to fire your minister that is accused of corruption, yet you say that your number one pillar is to fight corruption? So many questions that people have in Malawi or that people had. And then at the end of the day, it just looks as if the firing of Kezim Sokwa is just a smoke screen because there are just so many other politicians or government officials that are allegedly involved in this scandal.
Now, Yvonnie, apart from the firing, Chakwera said that he had decided to allow 3 ministers and other public officers accused of corruption to face their charges. So apart from expulsion, we have prosecution for these ministers. How much a boost is this in the fight against corruption, knowing that there will be no sacred cows?
Of course, the case of the former Minister of Energy is in court right now. There's a bit of progress. But like I said, it's like the president is moving 2 steps forward and then 10 steps backward, because I was just highlighting the issue of one of his former ministers who was arrested by the Anti-Corruption Bureau. And it took the president 3 weeks to have him fired. For most Malawians or for most people, it was simple and straightforward. We are firing you until the Anti-Corruption Bureau continues with these investigations. And then probably when you are cleared by the Anti-Corruption Bureau, chances are the president might have considered him in drafting him back into the cabinet. But if you have the president taking 3 weeks to make a decision, yet for most Malawians, it was a straightforward case, then we have a very big problem. So that is the reason why I was saying that the firing of Kezim Sokwa might just be a smoke screen. Let's see how far the case is going to go. Probably soon he might be appearing in court, just like the former Minister of Energy and all other accused persons. Until then, that's when probably Malawians will say then, oh, there's progress. But for now, there isn't much progress.
Now, Yvonnie, President Chakwera will be marking 2 years in office in June this year. What do you think informed his reshuffling of the cabinet? And would you say he sacked all his ministers on Monday and then by Thursday reappointed all but 6? Would 6 new ministers constitute a cabinet reshuffle? And what led to this, to the sacking of the cabinet in the first place?
There had been mounting pressure on the president, rather, in terms of the issue of former Minister Kezim Sokwa. The pressure was coming from both internal and external, in the sense that, like I mentioned, Zuneth Satar, who is this Malawian who was arrested by the National Crime Agency in the UK, was handed over to Malawi so that the Anti-Corruption Bureau should prosecute him. Now, that means that the UK government has got so much interest in this issue. So likely there has been pressure coming from the UK government going to the president in terms of making sure that the president has to act on his promises of fighting corruption and especially act on this particular issue. Then there also have been pressure coming from religious groupings, different organizations that are there to offer some checks and balances in terms of the executive arm of the government. So there's been so much pressure that was coming up in Malawi. In terms of the cabinet, well, just a minor correction, Gbenga. There are 9 new faces.
Okay.
In the new cabinet, and I just want to go a bit into details of this new cabinet. So, 30-member cabinet. The Vice President, Ostallos no longer is handling issues to do with economic planning portfolio. He is remaining with public sector reforms. Then we have 6 deputy and full ministers that have been dropped. And then 9 new faces, 12 female ministers that is full ministers as well as deputy ministers, 12 in total. And then 7 of those are full ministers. The number of full ministers that are female has moved from 4 to 7 right now. And then we have 3 female ministers that have been promoted from their deputy roles. Now, if you ask me if that was a cabinet reshuffle, I would say yes, even though there isn't much changes, because there are also some changes that have happened in the context of some ministers moving from one portfolio to another. For example, we have a new Minister of Foreign Affairs and International Cooperation who is a female. And then the former minister has now moved to the Ministry of Energy. We have also a new Minister of Finance who is quite young. And it might not be much changes, but there have been some movements that have happened, plus new faces that have been added to the new cabinet. What is remaining is for how these people are going to deliver, because there are some ministers that have, I will use the word, retained their position, like the Minister of Arts and Culture, the Minister of Information. So what is important at this point in time, much as the president might not have made much changes, but how are these ministers going to move forward?
Okay, looking at how we're going to move forward in Malawi, we know that the president promised, you said it earlier on, promised to create 1 million jobs and to set Malawi on the path to being as rich as South Africa or Botswana by the 2060s. Yes. Is there still time for President Chakwera to salvage his record before the next elections?
I would say yes and no. Yes and no in the sense that, he's mainly with 3 years in power. So a lot can be done in 3 years. For somebody that knows what he wants to do, I am sure the president can do so much and deliver so much in the next 3 years. But also, when you look back to the fact that it's been 1 year, 6 months of him being in power and there isn't much that has changed, then one is bound to conclude that Malawi shouldn't have high expectations, because in 1 year, 6 months, the president might have done so much, but there's just so little to talk about during the period that he's been in power. But for someone who knows what he wants to do, who knows what he wants to deliver at the end of the day, the 3 years that he's remaining with, or the 3 years, 5 months that he's remaining with, he can do so much that can change Malawi. And who knows, he might be re-elected come 2025.
Well,
it's still a long time away. So
yes, our fingers remain crossed. They say judge politicians by actions and not promises. Thank you so much for your contributions and time, Yvonnie Akonda Sundu. Thank you so much.
You're welcome, and thanks so much for having me from.
And our thoughts and prayers with the people of Malawi, your country. They're in the middle of rescue operations with regards to tropical cyclone Anna.
Thank you. There's just so much that is happening on the ground in Malawi. So much going on. But thanks for the well wishes.
Thank you, Yvonnie. Now, when we come back on the conversation, we will be analysing the political situation in Zimbabwe. Do stay with us.
Many thanks for staying with us. If you're just joining us, this is the conversation on News Central TV. And we have been speaking with Yvonnie Akonda Sundu on the situation in Mali, where President Lazarus Chakwera dissolved his entire cabinet late due to allegations of graft and formed a new one on Wednesday.
Now, turning our attention to Zimbabwe now, where the main opposition leader, Nelson Chamisa, has formed a new political party called the Citizens Coalition for Change, CCC. Chamisa abandoned the MDC alliance named after MDC leader Douglas Nwanzora, who claimed he was in charge of the MDC alliance ahead of by-elections in March. Addressing a conference in the capital, Harare, Nelson Chamisa, who narrowly lost elections in 2018 to incumbent President Emmerson Mnangagwa, said the political party will chart a new course and it's the start of a new trajectory in Zimbabwe.
And meanwhile, the Zimbabwe Electoral Commission, ZEC, says there won't be any by-elections in 6 constituencies where some lawmakers who were recalled by the opposition movement for democratic change, that is the MDCT, won a court case earlier this year to stay in parliament, but President Emmerson Mnangagwa recently declared the seats vacant ahead of the March polls.
Before we introduce our guest, let's just listen to this clip of Nelson Chamisa.
When you are in the jaws of a crocodile, you can actually be the next on the meal. So we know that literally and metaphorically, we are in the jaws of a crocodile. And anything can happen. They are fighting us. They know that we constitute an alternative. They know that we defeated them in 2018, and we are about to repeat that. Not just in the by-election, but also in the 2023 election, which is the big game. So they've tried to decimate us, to destroy us, to divide us, to defocus us, but they failed. Stop. We need to fix Zimbabwe in order to restore the dignity of the citizen, and that is what we are doing. So of course, we have not rebranded. It's a new party, it's a fresh start, it's a new beginning, it's a new dawn. You know, it's sunrise in Zimbabwe.
Now, joining us on the conversation is Ostallos Siziba, the National Deputy Spokesperson of the Citizens Coalition for Change, and Maxine Chisweto, a human rights lawyer and a researcher. I'd like to start with Ostallos here. Since the death of Morgan Tsvangirai, the MDC had not remained the same. How did the split among members of the Movement for the Democratic Change lead to several factions and ultimately the formation of a new party? Yep, Max.
Sorry.
Yeah.
Is the question directed to me?
Yes,
Yes,
Ostallos,
Ostallos,
it's directed to you.
So sorry, you can come again. I lost you a bit. Sorry.
Okay, I said since the death of Morgan Tsvangirai, the MDC had not remained the same again. And how did this split among members of the MDC lead to Chamisa abandoning the party and starting a new one?
Thank you very much. I will take this opportunity to clarify that the Citizens Coalition for Change is led by Advocate Nelson Chamisa, is a new political organization, so that has to be made very clear. We have been involved in this struggle for change for the past 2 decades with the intention to bring democracy in our country. Thanks to state capture and other shenanigans of the regime in Salisbury, the MDC, as was subject to attack and assault and a lot of challenges, as you have seen, unending court battles and so forth. And the people of Zimbabwe made it very clear that we need a fresh start, we need a new dawn, with the intention to chart a sustainable way forward for Zimbabwe. So, and you know that.
Ostallos?
We have been led by President Tsvangirai then, and that is part of our past. It's nothing else, nothing more. The MDC is part of our past. But we have begun a new political trajectory, values, identity, key distinct ideological persuasion, and a different trajectory and pathway to win Zimbabwe for change.
All right, Ostallos, you've mentioned the reason for this formation of this new party, that is the Coalition for Change, led by Nelson Chamisa. But over to you now, Maxine. Let's go back to the formation of political parties there. Now, if you look at the infighting among the opposition, that is the Movement for Democratic Change, there's been so much of a discontentment among members there. So how would you say this infighting has weakened the opposition in Zimbabwe? Or do you think it has actually weakened the opposition with this formation of a new party?
That's a very great question. And I think I'd actually like to disagree with Siziba a little bit. He says that the coming in of CCC is by what the citizens wanted. Of course, the citizens, to an extent, did want Chamisa to stand on his own, but I do feel like they were bullied out of the MDCA name. There was a lot of infighting that happened, and that led to a court case, and that court case saw them losing their name. And I believe that in itself was detrimental to them, because the MDCA name carries a lot more than just their belief system, or it's becoming CCC is more than just rebranding. It's basically losing the essence of Morgan Tsvangirai. You see that with CCC, it feels like we're getting a new type of opposition. We are definitely moving away from politics of socialism in Zimbabwe to new capitalism. There's a lot of new politics that's coming around. So I think CCC is actually a new party in itself. And I hope I've answered your question.
Okay, now you're saying it's a new type of opposition, but if we look at what they, said, he said they'll have a new symbol, which will be the open palm. Putting the fingers forward instead of the open palm symbol. And he also said the colors will change from red to yellow, but still their mandate is unchanged, which is the same thing with the Movement for Democratic Change. Is this not confusing the electorate at this point?
Is that Siziba or myself?
For you, Maxine.
To confuse the electorate, I think, as just a general citizen, I am half and half. I would like to say that it is confusing in that, of course, this is in the last minute. We're getting a new party. We're getting new absolutely everything in the last minute. But like I said, they didn't have a choice. What else were they going to do? How else were they going to salvage the losses that they've made?
Okay. Coming back to you, Ostallos, ZANU-PF has been in government for almost 42 years, and no opposition party has ever has been in government. The only time you had some sort of it was the power sharing agreement between Morgan Tsvangirai and late President Robert Mugabe. Knowing that there's a faction in the opposition, are you looking towards forming a coalition with the MDC or any other opposition party? Because, I mean, your common goal is to stop ZANU-PF from being re-elected in 2023.
Thank you very much. First, I think that I need to assist my sister in terms of understanding of the politics of the MDC. Look, we are not bullied out of the MDC alliance by ZANU or its troglodytes. We made a strategic decision because we are the founders of the MDC. We formed the MDC. All those guys were not there. And we know that the MDC is a movement. But when you see something degenerating, all those challenges associated with it, we made a strategic decision that, look, we're abandoning everything. It's us who make that strategic decision at the collective leadership of the democratic alternative. In terms of getting into a coalition of government, look, it's a decision made that is to be made by the people and the various organs of the party in terms of how do we interact with government, how do we interact with the election in the next election. But we are very clear that getting into coalition with Monzora is the same as getting into coalition with ZANU. Because they are without ZANU, they are nothing. It's an agent and an outfit sponsored and supported by ZANU-PF. We control the majority, and to prove that the assumptions around the role of Morgan, Rita, Tsvangirai, and that the association with them, MDC alliance, removes us from our history in terms of our contribution. Far from it, because you will see in the next by-election on the 26th of March, a determination by the people of Zimbabwe who confirm. And to show that this is where Morgan Tsvangirai would have wanted to precisely. And he knows, because this movement has been subjected to ourselves by the regime for a number of years. And we made strategic decisions in terms of how do we move forward as a people. We have no time. We are preparing to govern. If you can see the deployments that we are doing in terms of our leadership capacities, the creation of a new Zimbabwe blueprint is an agenda of us to say, how do we intend to govern? So that's what our focus is. And we're going to defeat ZANU-PF. It's clear. There's no doubt.
All right.
Ostallos, sorry, stay with you, Ostallos. Democracy is a game of numbers. Does your new party have the numbers? And how much of your former support base in the MDC do you think you can galvanize to support?
We're going to get more than 3 million votes. Our target is to get 6 million votes. So that one is on quantitatively will prove that we're the only game in town. The by-election are also going to be litmus tests in terms of our huge social base. We are going to an election in the next few months, and believe you me, we are getting more than 90%, if not 95% of the seats in parliament. So
that's quite ambitious.
That we've got the numbers.
May I respond to that?
All right, Maxine. Okay, go on.
I think, Siziba, one thing that you might be forgetting here is that I am the exact voter that you want, right? So everything that you're saying, I'm hearing what you're saying. I'm hearing you're saying that you guys' politics hasn't changed. I'm hearing that you're just saying it's just a name, but everything is the same. But if I am ideally your ideal voter, but I do not believe half the things that you're saying, how are you going to assure me that you guys just didn't lose a name? You guys just weren't bullied out of a name? That, with you coming with a name in the last minute, this is literally the 13th hour. How are you going to assure me that everything that has happened to dismantle your politics, for you to abandon, as you say, to abandon the party name that you left behind, how are you going to assure me that you can carry that forward with my vote, with my X on your CCC? How are you going to tell me? How are you going to assure me that tomorrow you're not just giving me promises, but you're actually going to carry it up? What are you standing on?
Ostallos, I think she's asking you that question. So do you have a response?
Of course. There's no doubt. I invite you to our platform. We made a national address to explain the strategic direction that we're taking and the new changes that we are making, and I expect more. I talked about the new Zimbabwe blueprint, which charts a separate, different path for us as an alternative movement. And I'm happy that my sister wants to know a lot of things about the alternative and to prove. And I've said that the by-election is going to prove that, in actual fact, I can give you this in absolute certainty, that we are actually not late. Our roadmap was that we launched the party in our policy conference in 2022 towards the end of this year. So we've actually done it earlier than, so that's why we're doing the roadmap to the official launch. So we are ahead. We are far ahead.
You look at how you say that you're ahead. I understand that. You say that you're ahead, right? And I understand everything that you're saying. I don't speak from a point of not following everything that's been happening. I'm very close to it, actually. And one thing that I feel like I need from you more as CCC is more assurance to the public. It's just not something that you keep in secret as a party and then you don't communicate and filter down to the rest of the world. And one thing I think that maybe perhaps sometimes you feel like you're safe as CCC is because there's social media following. But 3/4 of the people I follow on social media who are chanting CCC are not in Zimbabwe. That is a diaspora vote that you actually do not have. So how do you challenge ZANU-PF, for example, that can go give out incentives to all those 7 million people that are in the rural areas? How actually 70% of the population is in the rural areas. How do you challenge that? How are you not just, as they call you, a barking dog? How is this actually strategic? In the 13th hour, how are you going to tell 70% of rural Zimbabwe that we've gone yellow?
These are very important questions.
Ostallos.
Yeah, with due respect, my sister, I think that the assumption that the democratic movement is on social media is not truthful. We are present on social media more because the state, I don't get this kind of, and I want to thank you guys for hosting us. We don't get this opportunity from state media in Zimbabwe. So the only platform of communication is social media for us, because we don't have access to state media, whether it's the national broadcasting services and so forth. So, and then number two, to say that social media is not all over Zimbabwe, I think that is not scientific, because internet penetration in Zimbabwe is high. In fact, more than 70% of Zimbabweans are on WhatsApp.
Okay.
And we use that as a medium of communication. That's why when we formed a party on Monday, literally today, the conversations about the yellow movement in Zimbabwe and globally. So for me, social media is a tool that the regime has tried to undermine, but it's a critical platform that we have utilized.
All right, Ostallos.
Spread the message.
Okay, I'm coming to you, Maxine. You're talking about giving assurances from this new party, that's the Citizens Coalition for Change. Does it mean you do not see this party as a strong contender for the by-elections?
Wow, for by-elections, I think it's a bit shaky. For presidential, definitely, I think they are a strong contender. I think one thing that as citizens, I speak for myself, I speak for a couple of people that I know, is we may seem like we're harsh to CCC, but it's just that as the party that is actually promising us change, they need to be held accountable. They need to be held to book, because one mistake that we've done for so long is not to ask ZANU-PF the critical and important questions. So for us, we need to ask CCC these questions.
Okay, thank you. I'd like to talk to Ostallos here. It's been a few years since the last contentious general elections, and we inch closer to the 2023 general elections in Zimbabwe. How would you rate the democratic environment in Zimbabwe, and do you think the Zimbabwe Electoral Commission is ready to be an unbiased umpire, and are they ready? Have they improved since the last outing? What's your assessment of the ZEC?
Thank you. That's a very important question. In fact, we've made it very clear that the 2022 election, by-election happening in March, is a litmus test for institutions of government, particularly the Zimbabwe Electoral Commission, in terms of its capacity to run election in this country. Because for the past 2 decades, in fact, since independence, elections in this country has been very much contested, including a court case whose determination is not still out, where Mugabe's election was challenged by Dr. Morgan and Richard Tsvangirai. Both the applicant and the respondent are deceased, but the court has not made a decision. So it's a litmus test on the capacity of the Electoral Commission to run the election. It's a capacity of the state to give the necessary reforms to run a free, fair, and credible election. So we are using this as a litmus test, not just of our capacity, because we know our capacity as it's going to come out, but to see how much the Zimbabwe Electoral Commission can be able to deliver a free, fair, and credible election, so that we know how we engage with the 2023 plebiscite. Because for us, we made it very clear that our roadmap is bringing change and transformation through an electoral process to bring about a possible democratic breakthrough in Zimbabwe.
All right, Maxine, over to you now. Sometime last year, there were several calls for an inclusive government. You talked so much about how the people did not question the actions of the ZANU-PF, and some of these political parties come around the same mandate of bringing change in Zimbabwe. So do you believe an inclusive government in Zimbabwe will solve most of the economic challenges and probably democratic growth in Zimbabwe?
I think that the call for inclusive government is literally Zimbabweans having the memory of 2009, how the government of national unity worked. But one thing that we must really remember is that the key players in that government of national unity are gone. Mugabe is gone. Morgan Tsvangirai is gone. Yeah. So you find that, I would say, would CCC even have a fair play? Would they be allowed to voice? This is a very different animal that they're dealing with now. That doesn't give them probably that leeway, that chance. So I think the situations are very different. And to call for an inclusive government, I just think that doesn't work. That just won't work.
Okay, Ostallos, looking at the electoral system in Zimbabwe, does Zimbabwe, because Maxine took you up on that, I mean, your diaspora is quite huge, and there's Zimbabwean citizens, and the Zimbabwean economy does gain a lot from these remittances. And like your Southern African neighbors in the Republic of South Africa, they do allow for diaspora voting. What's the situation in Zimbabwe, and are there any moves if there is no diaspora voting to allow Zimbabweans living abroad to vote?
Yeah, we released a document called Prize, which is a document that has the key reforms that we demand. And one of the critical reforms that we demand ahead of the 2023 election is diaspora vote. We can't be the only country in this part of Africa that does not allow citizens in diaspora to vote, precisely for the following reasons. Number one, they've sustained the Zimbabwean economy, for the past a decade. With the economic collapse of Zimbabwe's political economic infrastructure, the diaspora has supported the sustainability of Zimbabwe's progression. And again, secondly, the aspect of the constitution of Zimbabwe, which guarantees every citizen the right to vote. So we believe that, of course, we know the politics behind that. The state and the regime in Salisbury doesn't believe that the diaspora vote can give votes to ZANU-PF. So it's part and parcel of critical reform that we genuinely believe that is a critical and a key condition and a key demand for us ahead of the 2023 election. I want to say this so that the world must know that we are dealing with one of the most sophisticated dictators in Southern Africa. And I want to answer the previous issue that was raised by my sister about releasing strategies and engaging the populace. We have to be very much strategic on how do we engage, because we are dealing with a lethal, brutal, and sophisticated fascist military regime. And for us to be pronouncing the question of change and transformation in our country is in itself an act of treason. So it's a very difficult terrain, but we are conscious of that reality, and we are very clear. That's why we continue to demand critical reforms, including granting of diaspora vote.
Now, Maxine, over to you. We're looking at the 2017 Zimbabwean coup d'etat, which removed Zimbabwean President Robert Mugabe as president and party leaders of the ZANU-PF. Now, did it have any impact on Zimbabwean politics in your own position?
Sorry, please just come again.
I'm talking about the 2017 coup d'etat in Zimbabwe, which removed Robert Mugabe as president and party leader of the ZANU-PF. Did it have any impact on Zimbabwean politics?
Of course it did. Just before I answer that, I really enjoy how the spokesperson here is calling Harare Salisbury, giving us that connotation that we're not independent yet. But just to answer your question, of course, it shaped politics immensely, because for a long time, I think we thought that Robert was our biggest problem. We thought that once Robert Mugabe goes, then, of course, Zimbabweans are going to be free. Zimbabweans are going to have a new chance at being Zimbabwean, everything that it stands for to be Zimbabwean. But as time went on, and we got the Second Republic, it was the Second Republic in the same clothes as the First Republic. It was just a new name that we're getting. So I think that's why as well, just to touch on the CCC matter changing its name, that's why we're very tough on them, as I mentioned earlier, because we know that a name change, a face change, can literally be the same animal in the same clothing.
Now, lastly, what are your reactions to the Zimbabwe Electoral Commission, Maxine? I'm talking to you now, where they will say there will be no by-elections in 6 constituencies. What are your reactions to this for the by-elections? Maxine? Maxine, did you hear me?
Yes. You're talking about the by-elections.
Yes.
Right? As my brother here said, it's a very tactical move. I'm afraid to say that it's cunning, but if we are going to have a pronouncement, first of all, to say that we're going to have by-elections in these certain areas, and then we wake up the next morning and then there's no by-elections, and then you wake up another morning and we've changed everything, you can definitely see the pattern there, that there's a bit of a panic. So that is sort of a grip and a hold onto power, and to quite show what they did in Parliament by evicting certain members of parliament, etc. So I really see that as a tactical move. I see that as trying to keep CCC out, and I see it's a panic.
Okay, Ostallos, just before we wrap this up here, the by-elections are definitely bellwether for you to test the grounds and the waters and see how things happen. In the case, because I'm just quoting you, you said your party, the CCC, is going to perform excellently. You're looking at 90% of your candidates winning. In the case that they don't win, are you going to re-strategize, and what's going to happen towards 2023?
Sorry, I lost you on the last part.
I said in case your party does not perform as you expected in the by-elections, would that change your strategy towards 2023?
Of course.
Would you be looking at coalitions? Yes.
Of course, there's no scientific reason as we stand of us losing the by-election. All signs, the telltale signs are very clear from where I stand that we're winning the by-election resoundingly, because citizens want to make it very clear, no uncertain terms, that this is the trajectory that the country must take. But if it happens that we don't perform well, we have said it very clear that the by-election is a side meal, it's a starter. Our conversation and focus is not on the by-election. Our focus is on the 2023 plebiscite, because it brings an opportunity for us to bring about change. So it's an opportunity for us to tighten our system, test our policies, be able to prepare to govern. But it's a side meal. It's not our strategic focus. Our focus is on the 2023 election, which we know that we are winning with a resounding 6 million votes, which we have worked on in terms of the methodology and how we intend to come about with that electoral victory. So we are certain, we are very clear, the mood in the country, the mood on ground forces, the mood in community is very clear that we are going to win this by-election. But as I've said, our focus is winning the 2023 election with the central message that I want to leave. Young people between the ages of 18 and 35 must be registered voters, because our program of action between now and December is to transform supporters into voters. Well, that's our strategic focus, to ensure that every young person is a registered voter. Because in 2023, we are deciding the collective destiny of our country as a generation, and not as a political party. We as citizens, we as young people, as a generation, we are deciding the collective trajectory that our nation must take. Thank you.
Ostallos, lastly, how do you plan to handle grievances among members? Because this was one of the major problems for the movement for democratic change. So supposing we have the disgruntled voices in your new party, Coalition for Change, how do you plan to solve differences? Quickly, please.
Part of the proposed documents that we have got a program to ensure that we've got a clear internal dispute resolution mechanism that we must use to manage contradictions. Look, we're a big movement and contradictions can emerge. And we've set a clear dispute resolution mechanism, which has got external players and internal players, elderly people with experience, so that we are able to resolve any emerging contradictions for any movement. Because we are deciding and having conversations around issues like the ideological pathway, critical values, a program of action. My sister was talking about Zimbabwe moving.
Ostallos, I'm sorry to interrupt you. We're fast running out of time. Yeah. I would like to say I'd like to say a very big thank you to you, Ostallos Siziba, the National Deputy Spokesperson of the Citizens Coalition for Change, and Maxine Chisweto, human rights lawyer and researcher. Thank you very much for joining us from Harare on today's conversation. We do appreciate your contributions.
Yes. Thank you.
And that's where we'll call it a wrap on today's edition of The Conversation on News Central TV. We talked about the by-elections in Zimbabwe. We talked about the formation of a new party from the main opposition leader, Nelson Chamisa. So now we have a coalition for change coming up in Zimbabwe. We also talked about Malawi, the president reshuffling his cabinet, and what we do hope to expect from Lazarus Chakwera in the fight against corruption.
We also have a radio up. Lots of things are happening politically on the continent. The ECOWAS extraordinary meeting is happening today, and also Pulse is on Sudan and other parts of the continent. We'll be giving you the latest updates on Monday. Thanks for joining us on today's conversation. I'm Gbenga Aborowa.
And I'm Rita Omodia. Do join us again on Monday, 5 p.m. West African time for another edition of The Conversation.